Hey, Slapdog! The Brainiacs are ready!
Welcome into LeatherBrainz, your host here, Slapdog, and boy oh boy do we have a fun episode for all you Brainiacs out there. I'm joined today by my producer, my good friend Scotty Del Rey, and also my good buddy MK. Gentlemen, excited to have you here today to talk some NFL football. Now, understand this. It's not a lot going on, right? This is the off season. So we are going to be talking mainly today about NFL news and headlines, kind of dissect and discuss some of the things that are happening currently in the NFL. So with all that being said, before we start the show, I do want to let all the Brainiacs know our website is back up and running, LeatherBrainz.com. Go check it out, and I'm going to put an asterisk here. Scotty, you just wrote an article. It's a great article. It's hilarious. I want everybody to go check it out. But our website is under construction still, so we are consistently adding new features every single day. It is not a clean, refined, polished thing, but the reason that we wanted to go ahead and release the website now is because we have things that our LeatherBrainz team wants to write about, wants to discuss, and so we've gone ahead, released the website while it is still under construction, so to speak. But go check out Scotty's article. It is over on LeatherBrainz.com. It's a good one. So, gentlemen, we ready to get down to business, or as Scotty likes to call it, get silly?
Yeah, we're gonna get silly. I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Okay, perfect. Let's first start out with Christian Watson, Packers wide receiver. He has struggled with injury, particularly his hamstring, since he has joined the NFL. And he thinks he's found his issue, gentlemen. He thinks that it's the symmetry of strength in both of his legs. He went to the University of Wisconsin, did some testing, got some testing done, and found that he's had hamstring issues, and he found that his right leg, which is the one that has continued to get injured over and over again, was 20% stronger than his left leg, which could have been causing the injury, according to the University of Wisconsin. Has nobody told Christian Watson the old switch the hands to, upgrade your strength adage? I really don't understand where that got lost in translation, because I think all men know that when your right hand gets tired, you switch to your left. I don't know why he was using his right leg so much. That's kind of what I took away from this.
That's what I was going to say, too. Like, what kind of activity do you think he's been doing? Like, if one of your arms is stronger than the other, we all kind of know you're spending too much time alone. But what do you do when one of your legs is stronger than the other? Like, you think, like, realistically, maybe it's just the way he lines up on the line of scrimmage and practices and on workouts and all this stuff with one leg forward, and he pushes off the same leg over and over again and just over time. But being a former star wide receiver myself back in high school, everybody needs to know about that. But when depending on which side of the ball you line up on changes your front foot. So maybe he's not doing that. I don't know. Maybe this is a technique issue.
I think we need to watch some film, gentlemen. I think that's really what this boils down to, because I was sitting there kind of thinking the same thing. Like, we can all joke about beating off, but realistically, like, what would cause this? And that's actually not a bad thing to think about as far as, like, is it his how he's lining up and pushing off? Because that probably could impact things if you do that hundreds and hundreds of times. Like, yeah, you're bound to get stronger in one way.
Well, and we all have a dominant foot. Maybe he's playing too much pickup basketball. He's throwing down dunks on kids' heads, but he's always jumping off one of his legs, and that leg is just super powerful.
If Christian Watson was playing basketball, he shouldn't be playing basketball, I guess is really where I'm going with this. Like, he shouldn't be doing anything because he struggled to stay healthy in his entire NFL career. If I was a part of the Packers organization, I found out that this motherfucker was playing pickup basketball at this time of year, we would be having some hard conversations.
As far as all the crazy things you can do in the offseason, though, pickup basketball is not too bad. You get people like crashing jet skis and flipping over four-wheelers and all sorts of stupid shit.
Yeah, crashing cars on the interstate.
Well, we don't need to bring that up right now.
Yeah.
Wait, but isn't it normal, at least a decent amount, to start off, like, to go off of the same foot every time? Like, I never played football for more than 1 year in, like, middle school, but I would always feel like even when I play casually with my friends, I feel like I'm always going off the same foot. I'm always, go off. My first step is right, I think. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah,
but
you got to think about it.
I feel like that's, yeah. Okay, well, you have to think about it. You have to think about it, but, it's it's not that hard, and I feel like it shouldn't be something that really goes on your, should hurt you in any way. So I'm a little confused how the doctors find that this could be such an interesting thing to him getting hurt. Maybe he's just an injury-prone player, or maybe he's just not that great at all.
Oh,
Whoa.
MK coming in with the heat, wearing that Chicago's Bears shirt. Is there any biasy here?
Like, this is just straight off because Scotty was telling me that I had to, trash on the Broncos before we started this episode. And, like, the reality is, like, I don't really have that same hatred for the Broncos, but I do have that hatred for the Packers. So, there you go. I can help you out.
Is it because they own the Bears? Is that why?
Look, previously
right?
they did own the estate. Look, they owned the estate for a couple years in the past, but now it's like, I mean, come on, we have Caleb Williams.
Wait, have you heard all these articles coming out saying that Caleb Williams fucking sucks in 7-on-7 and they're benching him and stuff? Is that any of that true?
I've seen that.
Was that by the same writer that said Jamar couldn't catch a football because like of the lines on the ball as opposed to the lines in college?
There's some Twitter chatter going on saying exactly what Scotty said here. So look, I'm not at the practice. We're not there. But it's being talked about that he was struggling to throw a completion in 7-on-7. So I don't know if it's
I don't know if you
maybe it just speaks magnitude to that, Bears defense. Some flashes of 1985, I guess.
I don't know if I know you said you didn't play much football growing up, but I don't know if you know this. 7-on-7, there's nobody rushing the quarterback, so it seems like it would be easier to complete passes. Like that can't be a good sign.
I would agree, but I will say this.
It was probably like a 2-play basis or something like that. Like they probably, you know what the media loves to do during OTAs? They love to take one clip or one little thing and be like, oh my God. Like if you guys know that Twitter account, NFL Rookie Watch, and they are always just like completely overreacting on like these little things that happen in rookie camp and are like, oh, this guy's going to be insane or this guy's going to be terrible. It's like that kind of stuff that I kind of
as a Chiefs fan, I have to forewarn you that prior to last season, there were several of those stupid videos coming out saying nobody on the Chiefs can fucking catch a football. And at the time, I said, you guys are idiots. Turns out, I don't know. They might have a little bit of merit coming out of preseason.
I will say this about Caleb Williams. I did see a little presser that he did in which he was talking about leadership, and he's for somebody who has been just ran through the media recently, he said something that I was actually kind of surprised with. And he's like, before I can ever be a leader, I need to watch the veterans. He goes, so I'm going to shut my mouth and keep my eyes and ears open. And I was like, okay, like that's actually a respectable thing to hear from a guy who has constantly been, that's kind of been one of the things that a lot of people are worried about. Is like, is he going to come in and he have too much swagger and think he's already the guy when he has, he's unproven in the NFL. So for him to say that, I was like, okay, the proof is in the pudding. We'll see what happens here. But it was a nice thing to see, to kind of deviate a little bit of that negative mentality that I think the NFL media has kind of given him. So we'll see. Let's move over to DeMeco Ryans, Texans head coach. He had stated that both Dameon Pierce and Joe Mixon can be a 1-2 punch in Houston. Let's put our fantasy football hats on here for just a moment, gentlemen. Which one of these two gentlemen would you prefer to draft in fantasy football, or which one do you think is going to have a better year this upcoming year?
First of all, I don't know what the opposite of breaking news is, but a coach saying both of our running backs are going to play. That's like, I don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's rewind to the beginning of the episode where I said there's not a ton to talk about, so we're grasping at straws a little bit here, and that's kind of where we're at for NFL news.
Well, with all that said, I think like almost every backfield in the NFL, when you're talking about a fantasy perspective, you're going to have a split backfield. So it's just a matter of hoping that your guy gets in the end zone. Because
who's 1A and who's 1B?
Well, if one of them gets 51% of the carries and the other one gets 49% of the carries, it's really just a toss flip or a coin flip. But I tend to lean toward Dameon Pierce just because I've seen Joe Mixon play, and I think he is getting close to being talked about as somebody who's almost washed. I know that was also breaking news. He's being close. He's getting close
He's
to
getting
almost being
close.
talked about someone.
Yeah.
But I do have to say I am a little bit worried about Joe Mixon and his longevity. Dameon Pierce, obviously, we saw him take a step back last season, but we know what he's capable of. So I think Dameon Pierce, as the young buck, is still going to carry the majority, probably a very slim majority.
You agree with that, MK?
That was a hot take by Scotty right there. Definitely not something I was expecting. The fantasy community is very high on Joe Mixon this season. And look, they signed him to a 3-year deal. Pierce was pretty disappointing. And I feel like most people out there are going to rank Mixon higher than Singletary. And if Pierce wasn't getting the touches with Singletary, I can't see him getting a ton of touches with Mixon. I'm a Pierce owner myself, so I love to hear that. Like,
You're like, gas me up, Scotty.
It's gonna be a 1-2 punch, and that's great because it's like, I think if you have Pierce in dynasty leagues, or if you're gonna draft him, in the last round, all you're hoping out of him is a handcuff. And if Mixon goes down for a couple weeks, you have a starting running back. If the running back market gets bleak again, so I think with this offense, it's gonna be a pass-heavy offense. So the touches are going to be a little bit more limited. Like, I don't think Mixon's going to be touching the ball 20 plus times a game, but it's going to be higher value touches because, teams are going to have to play back against Nico, newly, freshly signed Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Stephon Diggs. So nobody's going to be able to stack the box against them, and they're going to be scoring a lot of touchdowns. So Mixon could be a double-digit touchdown guy this season, but I don't think he'll be anything crazy. I think he'll be a high-end RB2. His peak, if he scores double-digit touchdowns, could be a low-end RB1.
Well, and one last thing to add to that, and if you rewind back to preseason last year when we were talking about Devin Singletary on this team, you will hear yours truly say Devin Singletary is going to be on the field a lot more than people expect because he is an incredible pass blocker, and that's what they want. And Devin Singletary going into last season obviously had a great season last year, but going into last season, people were kind of unsure about what his production could be, and I told you that he is going to be on the field a lot. I'm not as worried about that with Joe Mixon. We saw Joe Burrow completely unable to stay healthy, in part because nobody's blocking for him, including Joe Mixon. So I think that Dameon Pierce is going to make a little bit of a resurgence in this offense coming in 2024.
I hope you're right.
You mentioned Nico Collins. He got a 3-year, $72 million extension with like 50-something million in guarantees. I posed this question because I saw something on Twitter. I keep calling it Twitter. I don't know what to call it. I'm just going to continue to call it Twitter because that seems appropriate. I saw somebody say casuals will ask, is this warranted? Which I felt attacked because I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I didn't tweet it, but I'm sitting there thinking, was that warranted? Is that money warranted? And so, like I said, I felt a little attacked, and I saw that, knew we were going to be recording this show, wanted to pick your guys' brains on it, and then I thought, does that just mean we're casuals, or is this guy kind of an asshole? So I say all this to pose the question, was it warranted? Is Nico Collins worth $72 million? Because that's what he got paid. And you also got to imagine Stephon Diggs is sitting there probably a little envious because he knows he's not going to see a contract like that. And it might also reduce his chances of getting a contract extension himself after this season. So I'm really curious. Do you guys think this was warranted for Collins getting this signing?
It's hard for me to say no, considering one of their receivers is a gunshot victim and the other is a drama queen. So it's like I think they're just like, we need to secure the normal guy on our roster who's not getting shot and throwing temper tantrums on national TV. So, it's hard for me to say, it's whatever. You, like we said before, countless times, in all seriousness, when you have a quarterback that you think is the guy, time to spend money. Time to do what you have to do to keep the pieces around. And so I have a hard time blaming franchises who say, okay, maybe this is a little bit of an overpay, but we know this guy works with our quarterback and we know that we have a window here. So let's capitalize, screw the future. Let's focus on right now and let's win some games. So that's where I stand on it.
Yeah, I love the signing, to be honest. I'm huge on Nico Collins this season. I think he's going to be the one in this offense. I don't think Diggs is going to be, he was only on a 1-year deal. So I think realistically he's more of a placeholder for this year. Hopefully get more development out of Tank Dell and Nico still, only coming into like his 4th or 5th year now. So I think that this is a steal for the Texans. Obviously, you look at receivers that were paid around the similar amount. Michael Pittman got a very similar deal, I think a couple million less. Calvin Ridley got a similar deal in terms of amount per year. I think Christian Kirk did similar about 2 years ago when he got signed to Jacksonville. If you compare him to those receivers, I like him more than all those receivers, other than maybe Michael Pittman. So I think when you're talking about a guy that's CJ Stroud's wide receiver one, he had a great all-around year, deep threat, was able to produce at a very high level, even without Tank Dell, when he was the clear wide receiver one and part of that, very short but very earned playoff run. So, Nico definitely really good for his longevity, knowing that he's locked in for another 3 to 4 years with CJ Stroud. And I think he's going to be the one in that offense. So he is a buy low for me right now in Dynasty Fantasy Football, and somebody I'm trying to scoop up in a lot of redraft leagues right now, or, best ball formats, whatever you play out there.
You think this signing probably just made it a little bit more difficult to try and get Collins away from the owners in those dynasty formats, I'd imagine. But you gotta explore it.
Like, I feel like people were pretty much I don't think anyone wasn't expecting him to not go back to the Texans. So I don't think it's like he raises that much in value. It just gives you a little bit more of a security blanket in the fact that you don't have to worry about him having a mid to bad year and then somehow ending up leaving the Texans, which again, hopefully you're not. If you own him, hopefully you're not buying into that anyways. But
do you think that this could be a galaxy brain move by the Texans to sign him before his contract is up, under the premise that he hasn't been a superstar wide receiver as far as your Justin Jeffersons or your, I want to say Stephon Diggs, but he's kind of fading a little bit. But you get the idea. We're like a big name wide receiver, and so he got paid just a little bit more than Michael Pittman, is in kind of that realm of those wide receivers and their pay structures. Did the Texans do this because they didn't want Nico Collins to have an explosive year and then they're going to have to pay him even more money? So they kind of preemptively did it to try and secure him. So that way, if he does have a good year, they're like, okay, we already got him locked. Is that coming into play at all, you think?
You're thinking a little bit too much 3D chess, I think. I think they saw a guy that worked and they wanted to keep him around and keep him happy. And that's pretty much the end of it. Okay.
Then let me flip the coin here. Did CJ Stroud, is he the causation of this for Collins? I mean, if Collins didn't have CJ Stroud here, does Collins get signed to this kind of money? Is the CJ Stroud effect real in the cause of some of this financial gain that Collins saw?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say he's the cause, because we saw Nico Collins perform out of his mind last season, so he deserves a lot of the praise as well. But certainly it's a perfect storm for him with how well he played, and then in combination with this team that found their one of the best rookie quarterbacks of all time that they want to build a franchise around. So like I said, they're trying to keep all their pieces. He was a pivotal piece in their success last season, and they're going to do whatever they can to keep him. So that's not to say that I don't think he might have gotten a similar contract from another team if the situations were different, just because of the way the wide receiver market is right now. Like Kahan said with Calvin Ridley, it's very arguable that he didn't deserve that contract, and yet he got it. So I think he might have gotten paid either way, but certainly his situation was the perfect situation for him to get the bag.
Yep, definitely a great situation for him, and I like this move for the Texans long term. That's what you're going to pay somebody, and for a wide receiver of that caliber, and to kind of rebuttal what you were saying about the elite receivers. Jefferson's about to make the mid 30s, and who knows what Lamb's going to make, and then Jamar the year after. So Collins is never going to make that money. Like, he just will never be viewed as that high of a receiver. And I think this contract also states that. Like, he's great. He's a top end receiver and people are going to respect him, but like, he's not going to take
He's not a generational game changer,
groundbreaking contract. Exactly. That's fine. He can still be great in fantasy, but for the contract purposes, I think it was a very, very good deal for the Texans.
Okay. Well, let's keep this train moving here. Ravens offensive coordinator Todd Monken stated that, and I quote, "If Derrick Henry gets 300 carries this upcoming season, we're having a hell of a year." I read that and I was kind of scratching my head as to what exactly the implications are. Is this a good thing that they're running the ball with Henry 300 times a year, or is it they're having a hell of a year in a bad way? And I think you could maybe interpret that in a couple different ways here. But then I got to really thinking about the realistic side of things here. And Derrick Henry he's getting up there in age, gentlemen. It's not like he is a young, spry 23-year-old running back anymore. He's getting up there in age. So how much gas do we realistically think that Derrick Henry still has left in the tank? Alongside with age, the Ravens historically, they've had a lot of injuries at the running back position, and I think it's kind of cursed. Is this of any concern for you guys, for Derrick Henry with the Ravens? Because I see a lot of people who are just so excited for him to be in the Ravens offense, and they're like, it's going to be amazing for him, and the Ravens finally found their running back, but their running back is like 30 years old, and he did still look like he had gas in the tank with the Titans, but is there any tread left on these tires, or do we have some legitimate concerns here?
Well, first of all, I also am very excited to see Derrick Henry on the Ravens just because he is the perfect human being to wear the Ravens uniform. He is going to look so unbelievably cool, so I'm very excited for that. But, I mean, let's just think about this. Derrick Henry on a team with basically no other weapons saw 270 carries. This is a Ravens team that, for the first time in a very long time, actually has some weapons as pass catchers. And not to mention, of course, Lamar Jackson, who's capable of running himself. I don't think there's any way he gets anywhere near 300 carries this season. But with that said, I think his carries are going to be meaningful. I think they're going to do a lot of cool stuff in the backfield with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. So he's someone from a fantasy perspective anyway. I know that's not what you asked, but I would be relatively excited to own Derrick Henry. And as far as the injury concerns and the age concerns, until we start seeing the decline, it's like, especially in redraft leagues, just go for it, dude. Like, this guy very well could be totally fine for this season. We haven't really seen a ton of factors that should make you worried about him just falling off a cliff outside of just the history of other running backs. But Derrick Henry, still pretty good. We saw his efficiency decline a little bit, but again, he was on a team with no weapons, and now he's on a team with a lot of weapons. So I think his efficiency is going to shoot back up, but I don't think he's going to get 300 carries this season.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of with what Scotty's saying. I really like Henry for this season. I think what that statement by Monken says is that they're going to run him into the ground. How much does he have after the season? Probably not a lot if he is able to stay healthy. I could see him playing maybe one more season and being decent, but you have to look at the upside here, especially with what Gus Edwards was able to accomplish last year and Keaton Mitchell in this offense. Like, Henry, I think a realistic stat line for him on a every game basis is 15 carries a game. Now, those 15 carries a game could be for 100 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns because he gets the goal line work, or it could be 15 carries for 45 yards and it's a really tight game. They're playing a tough run defense and he doesn't really get it going. He will not have any receiving upside. Not that he really did in the past, but you got to know what you're getting out of him. You're getting, in my opinion, what a good comparison would be, a David Montgomery from last year, where he's not going to be playing a lot of third down snaps. You're not going to get the receiving volume. And in games where the Ravens are destroying, he could give you multiple touchdowns, but you also have to be prepared for a very low floor for your fantasy team. But he could be great this year. Obviously, the 20 touchdown upside is there.
I like that comparison with David Montgomery because I think it probably is a potentially very accurate description of what we see from Derrick Henry this year. So time will tell, but I saw that and thought we should talk about it because I've seen a lot of varying opinions on that. Let's go over.
We should, before we move on real quick, just let people know. I know it's easy to forget because of the injury at the end of the season, but Keaton Mitchell's still on this freaking roster, and that dude was electric when he was healthy last year. So there's no way he's also not going to get some touches out of this backfield. So again, Derrick Henry, I'm all in for, but we got to limit our expectations just a tad.
Sure.
For sure.
Speaking of limiting expectations, how much can we actually expect from the Raiders this season? I want to talk about their quarterback situation. That is something that I have also seen quite a lot of conversation about. Yeti, who is our Raiders aficionado, is not here with us today, but we're still going to have this conversation because I think it warrants discussion. I've seen a lot of conversation. Is it going to be Aidan O'Connell as a starting quarterback? Is it going to be Gardner Minshew is the starting quarterback? What do we think here? I mean, Aidan O'Connell kind of dethroned Jimmy Garoppolo to start the season and ended up the starter for the Raiders for a good chunk of the season last year as a rookie. Is his time as a starting quarterback in the past now, and is it Gardner Minshew's offense this upcoming season? MK, we'll throw it to you.
I'm a huge fan of Gardner Minshew. I've talked about it on previous podcasts now, but Bowers was one of my favorite landing spots in the draft because if you look at what Minshew was able to accomplish in that Colts offense last year, Michael Pittman was a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy, had almost 100 catches or had a little bit over. Josh Downs is a rookie in the slot, had a very solid year, getting 4 or 5 catches every game. I think that Minshew could lead the Raiders to a 7-10 record, maybe an 8-9 record, because their defense is very good. They're bringing back the same pieces. They brought in Christian Wilkins on a really big contract too. I think the Raiders made a lot of good offseason acquisitions. I am happy about that Antonio Pierce signing. I think he's a good guy for the job, and I think it's definitely an interesting route for the Raiders to go. But I wouldn't say the expectations are high, but if I was the Raiders, I would go with Minshew because regardless of how young O'Connell is, I don't really see much potential there. And I think that if you're looking for the development of your young players, such as Brock Bowers, I would rather have Minshew throwing on the ball and getting him to have a better season, which is, like, in my opinion, the only thing that matters to you on offense. Maybe Zamir White too. But either way, they probably won't be a great team, definitely not in the playoffs, and they could be a team that's searching for a quarterback next year. So,
yeah, you're nodding your head. You agree with that, Scotty?
I think it's well said, and I think that the record prediction is right on the nose because I look at this Raiders team and they're certainly better than what they were last season, but the lack of a solid quarterback option really does make me a little bit nervous. And I love Gardner Minshew. It's funny, like I wish Yeti was here because he said multiple times that he's like, well, I don't know, it's not going to be Gardner Minshew. I think it's going to be Aidan O'Connell. That's my Yeti impression. It's pretty good, but I don't understand how that would be possible. I look at Gardner Minshew and seeing the things that he has accomplished as that sort of plug-and-play quarterback over the course of his career. And again, exactly what KN said. You have these young pieces that have the potential to develop into some really great players. You do not want them to be stifled by bad quarterback play, especially when you pretty much know for sure that you are going to be looking for a replacement quarterback in the near future. So go out there, get these guys some reps with a decent quarterback. In my opinion, that's Gardner Minshew, and I think the Raiders probably win 9 games this year.
It's funny. I agree with both of you, by the way. I think I do think it's Gardner Minshew. I think that's who it should be. We kind of have an understanding that the Raiders, and we this isn't confirmed, but I think we're all kind of under the impression that the Raiders were actively looking to grab a quarterback in this upcoming draft, presumably Michael Penix, and then the Falcons did, and it kind of skewed everything from then on out. So it's no surprise that they're not really dead set on Aidan O'Connell, and I don't think he should be the guy. I think who I compare Gardner Minshew to is Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think he kind of fits that role very nicely. He doesn't have the beard, but man, does he have the swagger that Ryan did. And I think that that's kind of his role in the NFL now, where he'll go to a job and he'll kind of spot start for the year and then, help carry a team to. He's not wonderful. He's not Mr. Incredible, but he's usable and he's fun to watch and he does make some great plays. I think it's Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think it's Gardner Minshew to take this job to begin the year. So I'm glad that we're kind of all in agreement there.
He almost made the playoffs last year with the Colts.
Yeah. I know.
One play away. He was like that
one
little 4th down drop play away. And the Raiders have some weapons, Devontae and Bowers, and they have a good defense. So I think people are sleeping on them a little bit just to finish it off.
I agree, and I'm very afraid of the Raiders' defense. I think that defensive unit is going to take the league by storm this year. And seeing how the Chiefs played offense last year, that makes me very scared.
I think anybody who has Max Crosby on their team, you should be scared of them when you go up against him because he is a scary man. Let's make a pivot over to the Giants. We're talking about quarterbacks and how great some of these quarterbacks are. Let's talk about Daniel Jones.
Hell yeah!
It was a quote that
my favorite topic. Like
perfect. Well, then buckle
Scotty
up, buddy.
knows too. Scotty knows Daniel Jones my favorite topic of conversation because it just means that I get to bring up Drew Lock.
Oh God. Well, Daniel Jones was stated that it's no doubt he'll be ready for week 1 this season and stated he wasn't thrilled that the Giants did deep dives on the rookie quarterbacks in this last draft. I find that to be pretty humorous because what do you mean? I'm not thrilled when I stub my toe, but shit happens. And like, if you look at the way that you have performed You really haven't. So for the Giants to explore all options, shame on you. Do a better job. Make them not have to do that because you're a good quarterback. That's my argument. So Daniel Jones, I understand you weren't thrilled. I feel the tears that have probably fallen from your face. Grow up, do a better job as a quarterback, and then you won't have to face that situation while you're in the NFL. With all that being said, you want to talk about Drew Lock? Let's talk about him. Is Drew Lock the guy, MK? Is it not Daniel Jones?
Look, this is just what I have to say to Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, he can, just go relax on your couch, enjoy the 100 million guaranteed that you got to play football at a mediocre level, and just, enjoy the game from a backup perspective. You don't need to start anymore. You're not a future this league
you're
is
painting
not
a Blue
for
Mountain
you.
State picture here for me, and it sounds wonderful.
I'm just like, it's just not for him anymore. Like, enjoy your money. Like, if I was getting paid that much, then come on. Like, and I'm really not that good. Like, come on, you gotta just take what you're given. But look, I'm high on Malik Neighbors for this season and in dynasty formats, and that's partly because I think Drew Lock will start, and I think Drew Lock, he's had a few good games here and there, and obviously he had that. I'm not gonna say iconic because none of us are Seahawks fans, but iconic Seattle Eagles game last year where JSN caught that touchdown in the back corner of the end zone on that Monday night game or whatever, and that was like, in my opinion, where Drew Lock came out and started that game, and I was like, wow, interesting. He actually kind of has a cannon, and he's kind of been funneled through the Broncos, and it's just like there's just too much with Lock, and some talent, and to be clear, I don't like Lock as their future starter.
You're really selling him, so it sounds like you do.
I love Lock as their future starter, but it just doesn't make any logical sense to start a guy in Jones that for a fact you're going to cut. You might as well see what you have in Lock. He has proved to have good games, make good throws, and be able to run an offense. See what you got in him. And if it turns out to be nothing, you're going to be high up in the draft again, and you can draft a QB. But imagine if it works out. Then you have Drew Lock, and then you might have a quarterback that you're not paying 4 years for $160 million like you are for Jones.
All right. So there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, the Daniel Jones slander is just out of hand. This is a guy who, yes, obviously it goes without saying that he's dealt with a lot of injury concerns, and that in and of itself is reason enough to start looking at some of these rookie quarterbacks from a franchise perspective. But this is a guy who's played on a team who has done absolutely nothing to help him at all. And in spite of that, he still had one season where he performed very, very well, and then outside of that, his seasons have been derailed by injuries and a lack of receiving talent. So I also love the fact that they got Malik Neighbors. I think he's going to have a big season. I think I come at it from the opposite perspective. The Giants are paying this guy like $1 billion. They need to find out if they can keep him and make it worth that money. So I think they have to play Daniel Jones. I don't think they have a choice. Now, with that said, the injury concerns, obviously, they address that by picking up Drew Lock. The one thing that makes me very worried for Daniel Jones is the fact that Brian Daboll, if this team sucks, is going to get fired. And I think he is scared. And so he is going to do whatever he has to do, no matter what anyone else says, to try and keep his job. And if that means benching Daniel Jones, he's going to bench Daniel Jones. But I think they have to start him. I think he has to start the season and see how he performs with some additional weapons, with a little bit of improvements here, and see if they can make the excuse to themselves to keep him on the roster for the long term after they gave him that ridiculous contract.
I'm gonna break the tiebreaker here because we're one Drew Lock, one Daniel Jones. I'm gonna side with Scotty. I think that I agree. I do think that Daniel Jones is going to be the starter because I don't think they have any other choice because they're paying him so much. But I'm gonna put a little asterisk here, and I'm gonna try and appease both of you because I think this is a realistic possibility. If Daniel Jones comes out and sucks and he's terrible, I think we see a quarterback transition by week 5, week 6, somewhere around there, because of what Scotty had said about Brian Daboll. I think if Daboll can't do something with this team this year, he is on the hot seat, which is really unfortunate because I think Brian Daboll's a wonderful coach, but I think that the dumpster fire that has been the Giants and is continuing to be the Giants is a huge issue. And so he's going to get the boot. He'll go somewhere else. Maybe he'll come hang out, be our offensive coordinator. That'd be great. But I think that's a realistic possibility. So I do think Daniel Jones is going to start this season. But I also, playing devil's advocate here, Drew Lock was told by the Giants organization, hey, the quarterback room is not a lock. So, and pun intended. So that's why he left Seattle, was to come over and potentially win the starting role. So all's to say, obviously there's a lot of conversation that we could have about this, but we're not going to know until week 1 rolls out, or at least until we get closer to the NFL season and people can leak rumors. I think it's going to be Daniel Jones to start, but I could see that changing rather quickly in order to try and save his job. That's my
I mean, look. Let me ask, before we close this topic, let me ask Scotty a question. What stat line or achievement or whatever does Jones need to be the starter the year after for them to not opt out of his contract?
That's a good question. I think with the amount of money that they're paying him, I think I don't really think it's about stats. I think it's about the eye test. I think if he shows flashes of looking like he did a couple years ago, and they say, and maybe
on
the
his
big
contract year. You talking about the year where
Correct.
he had to show out and then he had a decent year?
And then he did. He had a decent year. But I think if they have the opportunity to see him perform and stay healthy for a stretch, I think that's going to be enough for them to say, all right, we're going to ride with Daniel Jones for another season. Because, again, they're trying to – this Daniel Jones, everyone on the roster, Brian Dable, these guys are all victims of a front office that hasn't done their job. This team has been dilapidated from a roster standpoint for years now. And so all of these guys in the front office are just scrambling to try and make themselves stop looking like idiots. And if they have to go back on this ridiculous contract that they gave Daniel Jones, and I do think it was a ridiculous contract. I don't think he earned that. But if they have to go back on that, it's just another notch saying, hey, we're idiots, we're still idiots, and we're going to continue to be idiots forever. So I think they're going to try and avoid that as much as possible. They'll use any excuse they can to keep him on the roster for one more season, in my opinion.
But one more season doesn't do they have an out after this year. After year 2 of the contract, they have an out. So if they take this out, they're done with that contract. So in my eyes, unless Jones plays at a Pro Bowl level this season, which is first ballot Pro Bowl, not where a bunch of guys opt out and you end up making it like Trubisky,
not like Tyler Huntley and
yeah, exactly. There's no reason to keep him because he's never winning you anything. Why keep him as a $40 million option when you can move on from him? There's just you're just pushing your team back, holding Jones longer, and that's why in my eyes it's. No matter what, unless Jones does the absolute unthinkable this season, he's gone after this year. So you might as well just see what you have in Locke. Obviously, Jones might be better than Locke, but at least there's not as much.
You could make the same argument for Aidan O'Connell versus Gardner Minshew that we just talked about, where you have somebody like Malik Neighbors, who legitimately is probably the first real wide receiver weapon that Daniel Jones has had as a starting quarterback. Because if you go back and you look at the wide receiver room for the Giants over the last few years, it's like an injured Sterling Shepard and like a 5'10" speedy guy who can't get separation. It's a bunch of nobodies. Injured, by the way. Yeah. The entire wide receiver room for the Giants has been probably arguably one of the worst wide receiver rooms in the NFL consistently over the last few years. The only players that the Giants have had on offense, aside from their offensive line, has been Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones's legs. And that's been a big problem. And at one point, kind of OBJ before he left. So
I mean, they brought in players over the years, but Jones has never been able to help develop them. They drafted Wan'Dale Robinson in the second round. They traded for Darren Waller. They drafted Jalen Hyatt.
I'm not going to say Darren Waller. You can't say Darren Waller.
Sure, but
Darren Waller's old.
It's not obviously Jones has not been given a Malik Neighbors level player until now, but he definitely hasn't helped. I mean, CJ Stroud wasn't given a player. Obviously, CJ Stroud is the complete opposite, but it's that's how, in my eyes, you can see Jones is not the guy, and you got to move on from him. So Minshew, obviously, in that situation, it is similar, and that's why I could see them going O'Connell, but they just don't have. If Minshew does work out this season, they could bring him back for another 2-year, $30 million deal or something like that. Whereas with Jones, it would be 2 more $40 million deals, and you're getting him for a long time, which just obviously is not going to be great. spot.
I'm not arguing with you that Daniel Jones probably isn't the guy. But I also don't think Drew Lock is a guy either. I think
Fair.
you still probably play Daniel Jones because I think Daniel Jones is a better quarterback than Drew Lock. That's my take. I've had the unfortunate pleasure of watching both of these two play NFL football for a few years now. It's not fun. It's not great. But if I had to pick which one, and this is a gross game to play, I'd probably take Daniel Jones. And with the understanding that, yeah, I probably would walk halfway through, or like I would walk his contract out the door at the end of the season and say, hey, we appreciate what you did for us, but go find somewhere else to play because we don't want to pay you the $80 million that you're guaranteed throughout these next 2 years. So I agree with that. But the other thing that I don't think we're really fully thinking about here is their draft capital. What if the Giants do win 8, they go 8-10 or 9? And I'm not saying it's a possibility. Is it probable? Probably not. But like if they do go 8-10, what's their draft capital look like? Now they're going to have to be paying to try and trade up to get a quarterback, presumably, depending upon how this next draft plays out and where all the teams are and how good they do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's kind of the game that you start playing where then you look and you're like, okay, well, what are my other options at quarterback? And then you have to start looking at the free agent quarterbacks who are available. And then you have to try and find a bridge quarterback. And then you have to try and tank for the next year. And it just becomes this elongated thing of what do we do? So I don't know. We're going to see what happens here with the Giants. And I'm interested to see how the media, as they start releasing some more information about who these starting quarterbacks are, what it's looking like in training camp, who's running with the ones, and we'll probably know more information in the coming weeks. But it really is an interesting conversation because we're all sitting here and we all have differing opinions as far as what we think is going to happen, and I think there's legitimate ground behind why we think those things. So time will tell. Let's go
last
over.
thing before you move on.
Okay.
Giants are plus 15,000 to win the Super Bowl. So
sounds like
good value.
I think we should throw like $10 at that, and we'll just be very wealthy at the end of this.
Let's just throw the entire net worth of the podcast on that.
Sold. We just made $100. Congratulations, Lions head coach Sir Daniel Campbell. I think I'm going to start putting a sir in front of him. He is not knighted, but I believe he should be. So, in an interview, he was stated that Jameson Williams is, quote, a man on a mission and is one of the most improved players on this team. And I bring this up because J-Mo has had kind of an interesting NFL career thus far. The Lions traded up to get Williams in the 2022 draft, and it was kind of it was understood that Jameson Williams, his rookie season was pretty much going to be a red shirt season because he tore his ACL in the college championship game. So he was going to have to recover from that. So Jameson Williams came into the fold for the Lions at the very end of his season. Didn't really do much. And then he was suspended last year for the first 6 games because of gambling violations. So he really hasn't played a lot of NFL football, and you watch him on the field, and he's kind of one of those guys in the Lions offense where he just runs down the field, and he's really fast, and he's hard to cover because he's so fast, so he becomes that deep threat target, which kind of opens up the field for Jared Goff. I think this was really, really a great thing for dynasty managers to hear about Jameson Williams, but I bring all this up because I don't want people who own Jameson Williams to get overly cocky here. This is a very, very difficult group with the Lions to be able to feed this many mouths. You got Sam Laporta, you got Jahmyr Gibbs, you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, of course. Like this is a difficult room to count on consistently for fantasy football, and Jameson Williams I don't think is entering that fold. So you guys agree with me on that one? Is this kind of like good for him, pat on the back? It's good to see that he's making steps in the right direction to improve himself, but let's not get too excited here.
Well, I come at it from the perspective of looking at the history of this Lions organization over the last couple of years. Whenever there's a player that is primed to be awesome, Dan Campbell only plays him for half the season and half the snaps. So, in my opinion, on paper, I think J-Mo looks good. He's probably the third target on the list between Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra and then maybe J-Mo. But obviously Jahmyr Gibbs does add a lot of question marks there. I think J-Mo could be really good, but I think you do have to lower your expectations a little bit just because of the number of mouths to feed in the offense. I mean, we expect this offense to be good. We expect this team to be good. A lot of scoring opportunities, but it's going to be difficult to predict exactly how many of his touches are going to be quality game in and game out.
Yeah, I like that take, Scotty. I agree for the most part. I think J-Mo will have a solid season, but I think this is more of a post that's better for real life than it is for fantasy.
Sure.
I think JMO could really help stretch the field for the Lions, give them a true deep threat, and Goff could hit him for a few deep balls this season. I'm sure JMO will be a solid bench option in fantasy, a guy you put in for bye weeks or if you have a lot of bad injuries, and he'll give you, a boom or bust potential here where if he catches that 60-yard touchdown, you're looking at, 4 for 135 and a touchdown. You're having a great week. But like you guys mentioned, there's so many mouths in this offense with Laporta and Gibbs and, even just running the ball in general with Gibbs and Monty that you can't really expect game by game every week production from JMO, but he's still pretty young. So, if you're looking for a solid bench option, I think he's a good player to go for. But like you guys said, he's probably going to be overvalued because people are going to read into that way too much.
Yeah, I agree. And I do own Jameson Williams in Dynasty, and like I'll sell him. Scotty, come buy him. But I don't think anybody's buying him because anybody who's paying attention to that entire Lions group knows what they're getting, and they're getting the last guy in the totem pole for fantasy. So that's my take anyway. But I do agree. I think overall for football, this is big news. This is good for the Lions because he needs to develop. That was one of the things that a lot of people were harping on him for was he wasn't pass blocking. He wasn't doing, when it came to pass blocking, he wasn't good at it, and he wasn't doing it properly and doing it the way the Lions wanted it to. And it's like, if you can't pass block in that Lions group, you're probably not going to be on the field because they do run the ball effectively and they need good personnel on the field to block so your big boys can get the touchdown. So
that's the case with most players in the NFL. Just remember that. If they can't block, it's going to be hard for them to stay on the field.
100%. Last thing to talk about today, gentlemen, is there's an interesting tweet that went out by Pro Football Talk. And this is the tweet. It reads this. As multiple veteran receivers, such as Brandon Ayuk, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, and CeeDee Lamb, wait to get paid, it's time to wonder whether supply and demand will make the receiver market go the way of the running back market. What do you guys think about this? I mean, like you look at, we were talking earlier about the Nico Collins deal that just got done, and we see a lot of these. What I just named right now are three of the biggest big name wide receivers in the NFL. Three of the best wide receivers in the NFL right now. Are we about to see like some huge swings in financials to try and get these guys secured? Like, what do you guys think about all this?
It's interesting. It's an interesting question. I tend to think the wide receivers, in terms of their market share, have one thing that running backs don't, and that the style of the game of football favors them right now. Whereas the running backs, not only were there a bunch of weird contract situations, and then you also have the injury stuff with running backs and their shelf lives, but the game of football was moving away from your bell cow star running backs. That's just the matter of fact. And the wide receivers don't have to deal with that. They tend to have longer shelf lives. They tend to stay healthy for longer periods of time. And teams want to throw the ball, put up yards, and put up touchdowns. And so I think we're probably going to see. It does feel like we're in some sort of market bubble in terms of the value of these wide receivers. We're probably going to see that reset at some point in time, but I don't think it is comparable to what we saw with the running backs, just because the way the game of football is played favors the wide receivers so much.
Yeah, I also agree with Scotty here. I think that's a good take. It's just hard to even compare the receiver and the running back position. The receiver is in that group of important positions, the second tier behind the quarterback, where it's, the tackle, corner, edge rusher, and wide receiver, that tier. There might have been one more in there, whatever. But guys like Jefferson and Lamb, you obviously have to pay them. If you look at what those offenses will look like without those players, both of those teams will suck, no doubt. I don't know who Dak Prescott is planning to throw the ball to. I guess they're just going to be running the ball to Zeke 35 times a game. So to be honest, these guys are going to get paid. It's looking like, Jefferson and Lamb are kind of holding out for each other. One wants to get more than the other. I'm sure it's a little friendly competition or something like that. But either way, those guys do deserve the money. They are so valuable to their teams. And, there's nothing better from a fantasy perspective than seeing, your wide receiver get locked in for a super mega max extension. If you're an Amon-Ra owner, seeing Goff get locked in for 4 years and then Amon-Ra right behind him, there can't be, a better feeling of security there. So good for these guys, but it's just hard to even compare the two positions.
I'm of the belief that I do think that, like, I mean, let's look at the Christian Kirk contract from a few years ago. We mentioned that earlier on the show. And, like, when that happened, we all were laughing hysterically. And we're like, what in the hell are the Jaguars doing? Christian Kirk is not worth I think it was like $70-something million. And I was like, what the hell is this? Christian Kirk was a Cardinal. I knew who he was. And I was like, this man just got paid this much? And I think that was kind of like, for me anyway, that was like the eye-opening moment where I was like, the wide receiver market is about to explode. Because if Christian Kirk is getting that kind of valuation, what is these like big-name wide receivers going to do? And we're starting to see that, with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it's coming for Jefferson, Chase, and CeeDee Lamb, as well as Brandon Ayuk. Devontae Smith got signed this offseason, or got an extension this offseason. And so, like, you start looking at these guys, and I do think that the running back market is diluting. I don't think I'm of the belief that the running back market is diluting. You look at what these contracts are for these running backs and these big name guys, and they're not big anymore. And yeah, Jerry Jones fucked up. He shouldn't have done that with Zeke. I think we all know that. But like, you look at what happened there, and it was like you could make an argument that was part of the catalyst for why the running back market is now where it's at, because they overpaid a guy that they shouldn't have, and it screwed the team over. You can look at Le'Veon Bell. Like, there's other conversations for these running backs, but they're becoming less valuable in the NFL because of exactly what Scotty said, that their wide receiver is such a valuable position and completely changes the offense. And most offenses are more stylistically catered to wide receivers these days than they are like the power game.
Well, and at the end of the day, maybe most simply put, is if you are an NFL franchise, you are better off with 2 C-level running backs than 1 injured A-level running back. And if you're going to give a guy, 25 to 30 touches a game, it's only a matter of time before he gets something tweaked, and then he's out. And then you're paying all this guy all this money, and you don't have your star player. And generally speaking, receivers don't have to deal with that on the same level that running backs do. So it just doesn't make as much sense to pay your running back as it does your star receiver.
I tend to agree. MK, you got anything else to add?
Nope, completely agree. Do not pay your running backs, but that's why right now it's any running back that just got, a nice little contract. Guys like Jonathan Taylor is, those are the top guys that you want to own in Dynasty, because a lot of these guys coming into next season, right after this season, are going to be, are they going to hold out? What's their situation going to look like now? Because it's just a different world than it was, 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. That's it. That's all we got today. We appreciate all you Brainiacs that have joined us throughout this episode, and I leave you all with this. Go check out LeatherBrainz.com. Go read Scotty's article. It's about Harrison Butker. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. LeatherBrainz with a Z.com, and understand that it is under maintenance, so we are continuing to add to it and clean it up and make it look nicer, but we wanted to give a platform for all of the LeatherBrainz team to start writing on, because we want to write articles and we want to entertain you guys in other forms, and that is one way to do it. Last thing I'm going to add is this. Please hit the subscribe button. It really, truly does mean the world. Go over to YouTube or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this at and hit that subscribe button. It truly, like I said, it means the world to such a small podcast such as ourselves. And while we are growing, we appreciate the support, and your help by leaving us a 5-star review really does mean the world. So I appreciate it. I love you guys. Let's get the heck out of here. We
are
out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tune into our new releases every week on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out LeatherBrainz.com for all of your fantasy football needs. And remember, Brainiacs, a championship should be more than a fantasy.